character, issues of trust, and issues of leadership. I think Nigerians must know who they are electing and who would be their president. So that is something that I think this debate must try to find out for Nigerians. Second, Nigerians also wish to know what this leader would do for them. How do we tackle these economic and social problems, including the political problem? And I think Nigerians deserve to know that. So they require clear answers, unambiguous answers, straightforward answers, and down-to-earth answers that people can understand and relate to and quickly interpret. So I welcome this debate because it gives the Nigerian electorate, as has never been before, the opportunity to know who their leader would be and what that leader would do. And I thank you for the opportunity, to participate in this debate.
Well, thanks very much, Bashorun Abiola and Alhaji Bashir. The first issue is SAP. And Bashorun Abiola, I'll be coming to you. SAP has been described, or indeed it is the policy framework for the reconstruction of the economy. That's what it's been in the last 6 to 7 years. It's had a number of benefits, but it's also had unintended negative impact on the social sector. Lately, a leading official of the IMF World Bank Group, which indeed motivated and designed SAP for the troubled economies of the third world, admitted that the program in fact had flaws. What are you going to do about SAP?
Well, SAP is not an SDP policy. SAP is the policy of the federal military government. They prosecuted it like a crusade. Gave all the propaganda, all the clout, all the force of government behind it. Like I said, it achieved some of its objectives. But there are quite a lot of headaches which people could see, and which people could see coming before they actually hit us. But SAP is not going to be our policy. We have an SDP economic policy, one that will really deal with the issue of excessive money supply. 1992 alone, 1 year, we had 41.2% extra cash injected into circulation. We all know that there isn't that amount of goods added to what we had in 1991. So that in itself has fueled inflation, worsened the exchange rate of the naira, and made things very difficult for the ordinary people and the not so ordinary too. That issue of money supply and the 3-year rolling plan, which was announced earlier this year. The plan is to reduce the money supply so that by 1994, 95, to have an increase of only 13%. A lot of things, how that will be done, we are told, but not in very great detail. We will visit that. Look at the situation when I get into office and do what I think needs to be done to bring about a quicker amelioration of that. Side by side is the issue of the budget deficit. 1991 figure of 12.4% of GDP as deficit. It's a horrendous amount of money. And these funds, the cash pumped in, not backed by substantive resources. Again, a booster to inflation, weakening the exchange rate of the naira, and again doing the same type of thing that we talked about. That the sum total of what has happened. This budget deficit issue continued unbroken except for 1 year for the past 9 years or so. Like I said in this program when I appeared, you simply must cut your coat according to the cloth you have available, not according to your size. And that is what we are going to do. It will really, but see, the reason why it will impact so heavily on the poor is that the poor have already been hit very hard on the head anyway. It will not worsen things, might even marginally improve things initially. But within 6 months, they will start noticing significant differences because of the other side of the policy. See, the NALDA idea, National Agricultural Land Development Authority, was an idea which my team brought back from Malaysia in 1990. I'm glad government is not going into it as a government-owned farm, because what belongs to government in this environment, as in most environments, belongs to nobody, as we found with the lootings of parastatals and so on. We are going to form a cooperative, and that will enable us to staple food supply. Once these are areas where once the supply is increased, prices automatically falls.
Okay, Bashorun. Alhaji Bashir.
Well, you see, when you talk about SAP, you cannot talk about SAP in isolation with its historical significance. We have to go back a little back in history and find out why, what brought about SAP and why it all went wrong. Remember, in the early 60s, we have an economy that was very young and that was flourishing at that time and well managed. However, as we moved along, towards the 80s, or early in the 70s, we discovered oil, and money was there in abundance for us, to use for whatever we want to do. In fact, at that time, money was not a problem, as you have heard. Some of our leaders at that time were saying it was how to spend it. So an era began of spending free. And then in 1980, early in the 80s, the price of oil became almost about $35 a barrel, and then there was so much money, and we embarked on a lot of projects. And realizing that, we had wasted so much money, a lot of restrictions were now being imposed, import licenses, restrictions, all these interest rate restrictions. Everything was now being plugged, to get the economy in perspective. So there was so much restriction, so much control, and that really wasn't wishing. Now, it was in reaction to that we had to make a choice when Babangida came, whether to take the Arab field or to devise our own way of controlling our economy and liberalizing things. So SAP came, and SAP came with intentions that were meant, to serve the purpose of the economy. I don't think there will be any government who would come and bring about policies solely to make things difficult for its students. But what happened to SAP was a sad story. Here was a policy that was very well conceived, but unfortunately went wrong, went sour because it was very badly implemented. I think that was what went wrong with SAP. You see, SAP intended to devalue the Naira. But what it didn't take into account was that to devalue the currency, with an objective, to increase exports, you must be producing for export first. But unfortunately, the devaluation went haywire to the extent that it was impossible for manufacturers to have insufficient amount of Naira to buy their raw materials, to service their industries, and maybe even, was still to bring about new industries in this country. So production, went very badly, and export didn't happen the way we wanted it. The other thing about SAP is that it was also intended to raise a lot of internal money in terms of Naira. Since government's main source of income was the export of crude, and this crude is priced in dollars, so a devaluation will bring about a lot of Naira for the government. And that Naira would be meant, to be channeled into productive sectors, especially into the rural areas, so the economy in the rural areas can be developed. This brought about things like GIFRI and so on and so forth. But money was raised, a lot of it was raised. Unfortunately, whether it was channeled properly or not, we didn't know. But a lot of it got channeled to GIFRI, but it was not properly used. So that objective also failed because it was not properly implemented. So you can go on and on about investment, why investment didn't come despite the devaluation, and why this, why that. And then plus, of course, this deficit spending, which totally was contrary to the principles and objectives of SAP. I know that early in, I think, 86, we overspent deficit by almost about 1.8%, 1.8 billion, I mean. And today, we overspent by over 43 billion naira, which is about 13% of the GDP, which is, I don't think it's 25%, but I think it's about 13% of the GDP, which is an enormous amount of money. And that brought about inflation, that brought about a lot of problems. So, but to say that SAP is a bad policy per se could not be very accurate. But to say that implementation was bad and that there is need to review SAP, to be sure that you pick those aspects of SAP that work and refine them and get them working and throw away those that cannot work, I think that would be a very reasonable proposition.
Okay, thanks very much. Now to the audience, first to the SDP, if you want to ask any questions.
Yeah. My question to the NRC president. You talked in one of your adverts, you talked about reviving the Naira within 100 days of your office as president of this country. How do you intend to arrest the decline? What specific policies are you to put in place so as to bottle up revival of the Naira, as promised by your campaign, which is 3 months? It's a 3-month period.
Well, reviving, if we say that Naira is dead, reviving it, could be anything. If the Naira get life, it begins to get restored, I think that will come a long way in doing that revival aspect of it. What value we want to get Naira to is a matter of policy, it's a matter of equilibrium, it's a matter of knowing what exactly we want to do. But there are economic apparatus that you can use to make sure that you reactivate the economy and the Naira with it. Economically, this is a problem that has essentially to do with supply and demand. Now, I have always liked to say that the economic management is just like driving a caterpillar. There are so many gears and levers, all of them lined up, 20 or 30 of them, and you have to be shifting them different notches at a time, but you have to know exactly which gear to touch and how many notches to take it, and so on and so forth. But we can tackle the problem of the value of the Naira and other economic problems, I believe, through careful manipulation of the demand and supply aspect of our economy. Now, let us take the demand side. I think it is necessary for anybody who is serious about this economy to make sure that he reduces demand on our foreign currency by reducing money supply. Now, we talked about this deficit spending, which is certainly a very bad thing, because we are creating money that we do not have and spending it, for purposes that are not productive. I think this is double jeopardy. Now, if you spend what you don't have, obviously you are creating inflation. And if you add money into your money supply scheme, that is certainly inflation, because you have so much money purchasing too few goods. So that is inflation. There is a simple explanation. So we can cut budget spending. And I hope that doing this will certainly bring about, the required, adjustment that we have to make.
I'm sorry, that's all I can take from you at the moment. I'll go to the NRC. Chief Tom, give me.
Alhaji Abiola, before you became presidential candidate, it is well known that you have publicly applauded SAP. Now I've heard this evening that you are condemning SAP. Is this one of the so many inconsistencies which you have been recently associated? Secondly, there are several planks of SAP. I'd like you to tell Nigeria whether you would like to come back to import licensing, whether you would like to stop the now moving trend for internal production, whether you would now stop the inflow of investments into Nigeria, whether you will now ask government to now take over private enterprises like the banks, like the hotels, like the airlines, which they are now giving to the private people. Let us know what your alternative now is to SAP, and whether you in fact your previous positions about SAP which you supported has been